A tweet thread that was by who is it? Matthew Foreman, who said most common it says most common activity in tabletop RPG, players role playing with each other, right? You can agree with that. That seems pretty obvious. But few games have mechanical support or feedback for this. Please put bonds, debts, intimacy moves, etc. into your game. Thanks. It made me wonder and think about role playing and how do you or can you effectively tie mechanics in the game to role play interactions between characters, NPCs, PCs, and stuff like that. Is there a way to do it? If so, how do you do it effectively? And let me hear, Cliff, of the people here, I know that you are probably one person who does a lot of thinking about and implementing house rules into your various games. Have you ever done anything? What do you think about the idea of mechanically encouraging and rewarding role play? What do you have ideas about that?
For the most part, that's not something I accomplish mechanically, but I have played games that do have mechanics that encourage it, such as Apocalypse World comes to mind. Having fairly recently played a campaign on that on our channel here. There's mechanics where you have a stat called history with other players, and that's a certain bonus or maybe even a penalty, so that when you roll to do actions with that person, with that character, you roll using that instead of something else. And at the end of every session, you talk about which character you might have gotten closer to or farther away from, and that stat changes based on your interactions in the game, but it's also fairly limited. There's also another, an intimacy move, specifically mentioned in the tweet. They're called sex moves in Apocalypse World. So if your character has sex with another character, this particular mechanic happens. We decided to adapt it to maybe be more of a sharing some sort of intimate moment with another character that didn't have to be sexual, and that worked pretty well for how things worked. But ultimately, I find that the mechanic should maybe be a little bit of a prompt and nothing more. I don't want to be. Nobody wants to be dictated by game mechanics how they're supposed to role play their character. Everyone wants to interpret and express themselves as they see fit, without being stuck to, well, you've got +1 and I don't know this, so you have to react this way now instead.
Yeah.
When I think of games that where that have moves that encourage things, I know Masks. I haven't played Masks, but I've heard a lot of things about how Masks and Glitter Hearts and some other Powered by the Apocalypse games have moves that are about teamwork, or that are about and not just like I give you a +1, but where they like actually encourage you to comfort or support someone, or like join powers together to accomplish a goal better. Another game that came to mind, though, Misspent Youth. Okay. So that game is not that there are no mechanics specifically that make it like you get a benefit for doing it, but sure, there's always a driving question. At the start of every scene, you have to explore, you might explore a question that you have with one of the characters you have two characters that you have a question with, right? And you set those up prior to even starting an entire episode. But when you explore those, that's the point of that scene. Like, it's baked into the scene somehow. And so that's a way that it encourages role play. Misspent Youth does it smart because it just keeps it in the narrative, and it makes it where this is the point, rather than kind of giving you the dangling carrot on a stick and saying, hey, role play for your +1 die or something, like right. That's. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask then, what you guys think, if in general you think it's difficult or to incentivize role playing, what's the problem? Like, tell me why is it a problem to give mechanical benefits and mechanically incentivize role play?
I think it's a perception problem, not an actual one, depending on how it's implemented. You know, like people don't want you to tell them how to role play, like what Cliff said. Like people do not want you to go, okay, cool. I know you weren't planning on having sex with this person, but since it'll give you a +5 boner of boredom, like please do so. And so you feel forced. I don't like that either, right? But that's not the only option there is out there, right?
That's a pretty extreme, ridiculous example, but I think we probably all had some experiences in some sort of a game where our characters were taken over and forced to do something they didn't want to.
Right.
And that maybe wasn't in like a traumatic sexual way, though. Yeah, I'm not going to go there.
Well, I'm just saying, like, but even still, right? Like, even if it's a soft force, right? Like, I'm not forcing you. I'm not like taking your agency away. But still, if you don't get the cool bonus, right? Like that's. I do feel that is a very frustrating way a ham-handed way to force relationships.
Right. So what you're saying is if the benefit exists, then people feel compelled to do it because they feel like if they don't, then they're hamstringing themselves.
Right. So instead, something that we've been kicking around for subversion, one of the things that we've talked about is community-oriented goals, right? And your community can be your team, to your neighborhood, to whatever. But you set your goals. Everybody sets their own goals, long-term and short-term. And then you also have community goals, right? So like your community wants to get out from underneath the thumb of this wicked landlord or whatever, right? So working together towards common goals is a good way to build relationships, right? It binds people together. That's part of what community is common experiences and do that kind of thing. But also, we encourage, I think we want to encourage people to say, and have one of your goals in the short term, right, be about one of your companions, right? So so-and-so, is struggling with their appearance because they're a dwarf, and they're hanging out with a bunch of orcs and they feel, whatever. So my short-term goal for this session is going to be to make, Sleepy feel like one of the gang, even though the rest of the gang is orcs, right? Nobody forced you to do that, but that is a perfect goal for the session. That's gonna shoot the RP forward, right? And then when the session is over, you say, okay, did you accomplish community goals? Did you accomplish short-term goals? Did you accomplish long-term goals? And again, depending on how your system tells you to formulate your goals, right? If it encourages you to say, please be relational with these, right, then you will. Like, that's just how RPGs go.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think by rewarding them after the fact, not with, here's your +1, ruler of smiting or whatever, but like, hey, you did a great thing for your community. Here's some community XP that you all can decide how to use together. That's the sort of thing that we're trying to craft that feels very organic and not forced. So I'm all for relational RP and mechanically baking it in, but if that is at the cost of any player agency, then I would say find another way to do it.
Well, I think what I also like about this goal focused idea and just like nudging people in a direction to role play rather than actually asking them to do it is yes, we're playing a role-playing game, but everybody, like, there are lots of different types of players, and a lot of people don't like they enjoy playing tabletop RPGs, but they don't like getting out there and getting deep into the role-playing. But they enjoy being there. They like watching other people do it. They like being part of the game. They like rolling the dice. And making decisions and playing the game, but they don't want to be made to do all the role playing. And I'm sure I know all of us agree that those people their fun is valid and they belong at the table as well.
Have you encountered people that are the opposite? Like I could get into a game sometimes and wish that we wouldn't have to fight. Like I feel
yeah.
I could just role play. Like, I know that, like, ostensibly the role play is just what happens between the fights for most games, but like sometimes I'm having such a good time just role playing. I feel like can we just put the actual game on hold and just keep talking?
Come on.
The fights are what happened between the role play.
I mean, Oz, that's every game of Fiasco we've ever played together.
Yeah. I mean, because that is specifically like you set up a scene, you role play it, then you get like this is what happens at the end. You get like a specific mechanic benefit, and then move on, right?
But I mean, also even more than that. Hold on, I just thought of another game, 2 other games. First of all, no, I'm going to mention the other one. Then I'm going to mention Oz's game that he's been working on. The first one is another game I played with Oz and also Palmer in the chat room and Scrim as well if she's there. We've played Antological Theory, which is literally just a role-playing game where you're role-playing ants in an ant colony that are just debating philosophical topics with each other. That's all you're doing. There are no dice. I think the only reason you roll dice are to select a topic of discussion, and even in the rules, that's optional. You can just pick a topic if you want. But also, Oz is we played this we play tested this on stream at some point. Oz has a role playing game that he's been working on called what is it, Oz? Tell us about it.
Lo-fi cigarettes. That one is you build the world, you build your character, then you build the world around those characters, and then you role play it. And it's literally, there's no dice rolls whatsoever. The goal of the game is to create a good story that you can look back on fondly and be like, man, that was a deep, interesting time. And you just basically you just play roommates in a cyberpunk future that can't afford their rent and need a cigarette break on their balcony or something, and are all just talking about their problems and like trying to make each other feel better or like work out whatever relationship issues they have amongst themselves.
I feel like that would be a nice what do they call them, like mini game in any other RPG, right? Like we're gonna pause this.
It really is
tonight.
It was really cool. It was nice to be playing a game that forced you to just sit down and like just role play together because you didn't feel like you had to get to the other stuff. Because
is that called acting?
I think so.
Right?
Yes, it was improv acting.
You're just actually just acting.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like I wish, it's too bad that we never got that video saved, because that was actually one of the finest moments of the finest role play sessions I've ever had in my life, to be perfectly honest.
It was pretty amazing.
It was amazing because the more mechanics that you add into a game, that's more that you're spending out of your character's head and looking at a character sheet and trying to work out maybe certain mechanics that you need to do to then get back into the role play or to give your role play meaning. But in this, because there are no mechanics, you just have like the sheet that you've created of facts about yourself. All of that, like, because you've already spent so much time prior putting that on paper, working through it, you have all of that in your head. You barely even really need to glance at it, but you can. And it just informs so much, and you just get to focus on yourself and these other characters and just be. And it was really, really good stuff.
Yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed that. So,
go ahead. Maybe the game mechanics that support player interactions with each other are ones that are self-generated, and they're more prompts than actual game mechanics. I think some of those very free-form games, it's difficult for people who are less experienced at role-playing or improv acting, find it maybe a little bit harder to kind of come out of their shell and inhabit this other world or other character. It's helpful to have those prompts. And I think like some of the games we've mentioned, like Misspent Youth, where you bring up and you write down these questions of like, say, with this person, why doesn't your character tell me that you have a crush on me? Like, that could be, a question that might or might not ever come up in an episode, and it could be answered all sorts of ways in the episode, or if people don't feel like covering it, that it might just not go that direction, and that's okay too.
Mhm.
I found that in our own Misspent Youth game, those questions influence things greatly in most cases, but I think in some cases not so much. And I think it worked very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because when you think of a game like Dungeons and Dragons, there are no mechanics for role play, really. I mean, everything is all about you roll the dice, you see the outcome, but there is nothing really about talking to each other and supporting each other on a companion, teammate, friend, lover, whatever level, right? Brother, sister, whatever. Like, there's nothing about it. That's all just added in by the players who want to give it that extra layer. So I think that's what this is really all about. It's why aren't there mechanics? If you call yourself a role-playing game, but you don't have mechanics for, or even a discussion of what happens when you're not doing stuff,
Right.
or even while you're doing stuff, because that's another thing. You role play the whole time, even while you're doing stuff. But why isn't there something to enforce that or give it like meaning?
Yeah.
What about the flip side of it with the game mechanics of, well, I rolled a natural 20 on my deception check, and therefore you believe what I just told you.
Mhm.
And even though, I'm maybe trying to screw your character over, and I'm having fun doing that, but you're getting pissed off in real life because we're sort of not operating on the same social contract. That's where I think any sort of mechanics being involved in player interactions is a problem, where you've got this, well, I cast charm person on you, so now you have to do this. That's I think that when I see the dumpster fire end of.
We have an unofficial in the group that I play with. It's not like an official house rule, but it seems to be an unofficial house rule that we just don't, when we're interacting with each other, we just don't make rules for that. Like, even if we're using it.
Kind of an unwritten rule in almost any game that I played, just sort of an unwritten rule of etiquette that that stuff just doesn't work on other player characters. That's only for NPCs.
I think we've used it on each other, but we just don't roll for it.
Anytime we've ever talked about it's been in this session 0, like, hey, what do you think about this? And usually every character is like, yeah, I love it, except don't use it on me. I would not like that.
Right.
So it was like, cool, we don't.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, great question, Palmer. Obviously, thank you for sending it to us over on the Discord. And if you want your questions to have priority, we pick from the patron-only questions for the show first. So if you become a patron over at patreon.com/Shadowcasters, you'll have priority.